Hello there, this is Ferenjianboardf speaking. This time I came up with an idea about parallel realities and, well, parallel universes. Now, the idea of consciousness, as I may have said before, is something that, um, well, I haven't covered completely, and I doubt anyone can actually cover completely, but what I feel and know about consciousness in a way is that it is dependent on experiencing. Now, the point is, consciousness is said to live somewhere up there in a so called 12th dimension. Now, this 12th dimension to me is not specifically a dimension, it's more what I call a level of dimensions. And the point is, these levels of dimensions actually have a certain encrypted vibration of theirs. Now, the point with consciousness is that being stuck in there, its own purpose is to create. Now, with it creating and constantly actually expanding itself through newer and newer facets that it brings to life, the point is that it kind of acts like a queen, and every other facet is part of the hive that actually is more or less, let's call it a gestalt consciousness, a connection that exists between all individuals that together form more than the collectiveness itself. Now, the point with these facets is that they set far and wide into the realms of consciousness and experience the lower levels of existence because they all have to gain a certain age. And, well, I'm not sure what happens to them, whether there are some of these facets that can actually, reach a level where they have experienced everything. Because here also comes the so-called and the well-known fear of dying. Now, consciousness in a way doesn't necessarily die, and from what I've perceived, the point is, if such a consciousness would get to have experienced each and every dimension and every possible nook and cranny, which is kind of almost impossible given how many there are, they reach certain levels in which they can actually start creating their own dimensions either within existing levels, or they can actually go further and create their own levels with their own dimensions, and they create their own facets. And again, what they manifest and experience, consciousness herself, mother consciousness, will also feel in parallel. Now, moving on, the point is very, very simple. Consciousness will always move further and further away from itself because it is important to find out all the possible limitations. And when a limitation is found, it means that there is something that has to be done so that those levels are actually breached, let's say, and, well, progressed even further. Now, consciousness, as it gives birth to more facets, they will start experiencing more and more. And the higher vibrational ones, the higher vibrational levels, are probably more or less some kind of tutorial. Things may be more advanced. There are forms of negativity in there, but however, there's always a tendency to try to find out more. So when a facet feels ready, they will actually go to next levels, which mean lower levels of consciousness. And the lower they go, the more they stray from consciousness herself. And through this, they will actually have slightly more and more difficulties. Now, this is where the challenges of life start to come up. In every dimension, there will be challenges in life, and there will be different levels of misery. Now, from the 12th level to the 3rd level, there's a very, very long journey. So, if a consciousness chooses to experience this specific life, well, it hasn't experienced this life only, and it does not experience this life only. A consciousness or a facet of consciousness cannot reach a level so low without, going through probably billions of other separate lives. And, it's the lower the vibration, the lower the level, it's actually where the big levels there are. Just like, imagine this experiencing just like an RPG game. When you go from a consciousness level, okay, it's like you have barely been born, your character has been recently created, right? And You're just exploring the first worlds, the tutorials, right? And that is where everything is easy. Furthermore, as you progress, things become, like better and better. And, you will go into areas that have greater and greater levels. And there, usually, the negativity becomes higher and higher. People will be somewhat more acidic, there will be more requirements, probably the time will be more lacking. You know how it happens in video games, so it happens also in real life. Now, the further away a facet of consciousness strays from consciousness herself, the point is that the more wisdom it acquires. And it also starts having its own powers, and it can actually create its own facets, so it can actually remain somewhere in a higher vibration, while also sending some of its facets and, explore different dimensions and areas that are further away from themselves as well. And whatever they experience, consciousness gets to experience through them, because each of these facets is directly linked to consciousness. Now, the question is very, very, very simple. Why does consciousness want to experience? Well, because it only seeks to expand. And in the end, why does life seem so complicated? Well, because consciousness never liked simple games. So, if we take our real life existence as the game it actually is, well, the game is very simple. Our brain only lives for the pleasure that it derives when that little hormone is produced, namely oxytocin, and well, dopamine and other little substances like that, that when created they give a state of euphoria. Now, the brain is actually the RPG player, and the oxytocin is actually the treasure. Now, the point is, you simply walk to the treasure and you unleash it. But the problem is, no, 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 it cannot be that simple. So the brain has developed all sorts of challenges, all sorts of ideas like predators and hunting and survival, and usually it structures things like in the same way that the greater aspects of universe actually work. There are 12 levels of consciousness, 12 levels of dimensions, well, there are 12 chakras, and most likely the brain also had to start from scratch when creating this universe that we live in. Now, this universe that we live in, it was created from the lower vibrations to the higher vibrations, because that's how you actually create something. You always start from the lower and you always finish at the highest. You don't build a building from up to down unless it's probably gonna go, like underground, but still you need the foundation first. Now, the problem is many people nowadays consider it as too much of a challenge to live this life. Well, in a way it is very challenging because it can be very negativistic, and there are a lot of people who pull you down and pull themselves down as well, and it's far easier to pull others down than yourself. And well, it's all part of these challenges. In the end, the universe will always conspire to help you. So the thing that people mostly don't understand is that what you put out is usually what the universe will understand that you want. So if you put out misery, that's what the universe will understand, and that is what the universe will actually be sending you. Now, the point is, if consciousness wouldn't be so dependent upon experiencing, now here comes one of my questions. Why is it that consciousness puts the whole universe at your feet so that you actually experience? The only thing that it wants from you is to experience. It doesn't matter if you experience pain, if you experience pleasure, if you experience suicide, or if you experience murdering others. The only thing it wants is you to experience. Now, sure, there are some plans, and each facet comes into a certain universe so that it experiences a certain thing. Now, the point is, there are chances that that facet actually strays from that, because there will always be distractions. And if such a consciousness strays itself from a so-called act that they have to commit to, well, now, the point is that there are also parallel lives. Now, in these parallel universes, there are different links, okay? I'm not 100% sure of this. It's still something that I'm exploring. These answers have recently come to my mind, but well, take it with a grain of salt. Now, with parallel lives, the idea is said that in other sources I've heard that the soul always incarnates in 9 different places. Now, I really don't understand why people come with this idea of a soul. I kind of don't believe in the idea of a soul. Uh, why not call it consciousness, or the facet of consciousness that the body actually lives in? The consciousness does not live in the body. The body actually lives in the consciousness. And now the point is that the soul is kind of too linked to Christianity, which is again something that I do not fully follow. So the point is that the number 9 is considered a number of God, so I would actually expect a lot of minds to say that it would split into 9 just because 9 is the number of God. Now, a consciousness, a facet, can actually split itself in far more lives, and the point is that these lives will go on at different paces. That is why some of the dreams that people have are somewhat lucid dreams, and they can actually see themselves doing like quite awkward stuff. That could actually be them in different lives. Now, the point is, you can actually witness your own deaths in different universes, and, well, that is not to be excluded. Now, given the almost infinite number of universes, it is not doubtable that you can actually experience life in, I don't know, even 1,000 other universes, so who knows? Right now, at this specific moment, you're probably getting born in another universe. You're probably dying in 1,000 of those. You're probably getting married, or I don't know, experiencing a certain same thing in like 30 of those universes, and so on and so forth. You're probably committing suicide right now in any of those. Now, the point is that consciousness will require all these different um, possibilities, because life is never simple. Think of how many choices you had in your life, and with each choice there was theoretically an almost infinite amount of differences of, let's say, different ideas, different situations that could have occurred, right? It's always been like that. It could have been like this, it could have been like that, and far many more situations. Now, with parallel lives, the point is that consciousness is interested in achieving a certain goal. So the point is, you can actually see a lot of people around you committing suicide because they cannot stand life as is in this universe. However, the reason that they cannot stand is, well, let's think even deeper than that. Now, consciousness agrees to experience 1,000 ideas because, let's see, if consciousness agrees to experience life in a miserable way, because let's face it, why would consciousness actually be interested in this world, right? It wouldn't come for its positivity. It would come to experience its negativity, because up there where it came from, there's already a lot of positivity, so most likely they come for the negativity. Who knows, probably they also venture into the two-dimensional world, and probably even in the one-dimensional world, and probably even further. Who knows, maybe there is something that we can call super negativism, or I don't know. And from there come entities that, actually they are interested in straying themselves from that consciousness, which is, let's call it, utter negativity, and they are straying more and more towards that so-called higher positivity. So life can be interpreted in thousands and thousands of ways, and the curious thing is that you're getting these ideas because they are true. You're probably not going to accept this because, the conscious mind would probably never accept such things, but each idea, the moment it comes to your mind, it comes into your mind because it is already true. Now, what parallel reality it came from, or what person you actually assimilated it from through your empathy, well, you probably will never know. Point is, it's not even relevant. Now, parallel universes, let's say that you experience 1,000 different lives and you're born into each of these probably at the so-called same time, but this time will be different because you most likely will and are living in different ages. That is why you are probably experiencing some dreams that, um, you are living a medieval life, or in others you are living in a, I don't know, uh, post-apocalyptic world, and so on and so forth. Now, when you also go to bed, you're going to experience different other things. So, what if when you go to bed, you are born somewhere actually, and when you wake up, you are actually dead in that world. Now, the point is, when your consciousness comes back, the information that has gathered is sedimented into the brain mind, and it will actually manifest itself as a so-called dream, but that dream is not real. That dream is only a reflection, it is only a summary of what you have seen. And also, the further the world was, the less likely you are to remember many things, and that's how things kind of seem to go. So when you have a dream, it's basically at the end of the journey. So when a person moves somewhere, it's the consciousness actually does not detach from the body. It creates a facet of itself, so your consciousness remains in the body in a way. And well, it can actually detach, or I don't know exactly, because the body actually lives in the consciousness. So a part of consciousness will leave, most likely the consciousness that's closest to the body, because there are multiple bodies, right? And it actually gets back in. Um, I don't know exactly, because things are kind of contrasting. In my case, I know that I woke up once before my consciousness came back, and I could actually feel how it would come back through the top of my head. Um, it was a tingling sensation, I could say, and I was like suddenly awake, like fully awake, and I was also conscious of how consciousness was coming back inside me, and it felt a bit ironical. Now, I also felt something heavy on me, and it felt like the giant paws of a giant lion, because when consciousness leaves, there are ferocious guardians that actually make sure nothing else gets, inside, because this is a fear that many people have. Now, you are not gonna be inhabited by other entities, because mainly the consciousness will not leave. The only moment when consciousness leaves is, when the body is no longer compatible with life, because that's what death actually means. For whatever reason, the body is no longer compatible with life. Now, to go even further, the idea of a parallel universe is, well, these parallel lives are needed for consciousness to experience. Now, consciousness might actually have and will always have multiple facets that we'll explore for her. And as consciousness explores, now, there is certain aspects that can go on, and for some reasons, uh, let's say the mission might be a failure. The facet simply gets too distracted, or it becomes too weakened by different parasites, which actually are still part of consciousness in a way, probably in a very detached way, and they also act as some of the hindrance, some of the challenges that will make sure that that specific facet of consciousness will not achieve the so-called role. Now, the point is that when a certain facet actually survives and, actually, let's say, achieves a so-called level of perfection, now that facet can actually be withdrawn. Now, when that happens, it's something that I call parallelism. It's a personal term. So when this actually happens, uh, it's kind of tricky to explain, but I will actually do it. So when a facet becomes, well, very experienced, even through that specific lifetime, and of course it's not the first one they had, so yeah, the experience, they already have grounding experience upon that, but it's when such a facet actually manifested itself, because the purpose of life is to reconnect yourself to consciousness, that bit of consciousness will actually leave, will render the body useless because it no longer needs it, and it will actually leave. So in that world, when that consciousness leaves, that body, well, strange things, or I don't know, sudden things will happen to it. It will probably run crazy, and it will end up in some kind of psychiatry ward. it will probably suddenly die. A lot of things can actually happen, and if you look around, you can actually see people that suddenly died. They're so healthy, and they suddenly died. What could have happened? Well, no one apparently knows, but this could be one of the explanations. Now, when a facet is doing badly, however, they can actually be taken away from that, and they can actually be put into one of the parallel lives or parallel universes where one of the facets actually became full and was no longer needed in that world. So consciousness withdrew that and it replaced it with one of its facets that was doing poorly, because it actually helps these. Now, probably you haven't felt this. In my case, I did. It's something that is called um, parallel reality shifting. At times, it can actually come with a shake, with a trembling, with a shiver or something. And it also happens that for some reason, around then, you're also kind of not conscious of who and what you are. It's what I call a consciousness daze. You kind of feel a bit dazed. So I had this moment, one of these moments, when I was suddenly playing something and then I was dumbly looking at the monitor and I was like, I couldn't actually remember what I was doing the previous seconds before. Is it was like, hey, you know what is like, what the fuck? Like, I was actually I was actually knowledgeable that I was playing that game, but at that specific moment I actually couldn't remember what I was doing, and actually again who and what I was. Parallel shifting is something that actually happens, and people, the more conscious they become, they will automatically shift to higher vibrational realities, and the facets that they have, and they vibrate at a lower vibration, they will be switched in their place. So if you start vibrating more and more positively, another one of your facets which is vibrating negatively, or it was sent by your higher self to experience negativity and didn't get a chance because all the slots were occupied, well, the switch can actually happen. There can be such a case when you're suddenly driving and out of fury or whatever reason you do something bad. You do a bad I don't know, you want to get in front of someone, you're in some kind of rush and you don't take some aspect into account, and you would theoretically crash and most certainly die. You suddenly are right then at that moment suspended in time, when you feel like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, and most likely you have died, but suddenly you're in your car and you're no longer on that trajectory, right? On that collision trajectory. You're somewhere different, and I don't know, it's like, well, what happened? Well, it can be something like a parallel shift. Now, this shift transported you in the closest reality that, there are actually thousands of realities that will actually, be developing the same exact way that you do. You do have those moments when a crazy idea comes to your mind. And such a crazy idea comes to your mind because you actually drew that idea. And the reason why you forgot that idea suddenly was that, well, another parallel you actually drew that and actually started putting it into reality. Because ideas are also entities themselves. They are sent by consciousness or, I don't know, angels or whatever. And they will seek the right you that will actually put it into reality. And in most cases you will probably shove those ideas because you don't know exactly what that is. Now, well, we kind of all do that, and well, it's those ideas don't necessarily come to the use, they also come to like literally every person and their extensions. And when they find someone who will actually start or actually is working towards something that will make those ideas real, well, they will actually go to those people, and the other people will most likely forget them and probably not even remember they had such an idea, because that's one of the ways ideas actually work. So now, with parallel universes is that they have their own purpose, okay? They have the purpose in which, well, one of your facets, let's say in the case of that car crash to be, one of the facets was designed to experience in the name of consciousness what dying or being heavily wounded from a car accident would be like, but you, on the other hand, are positive enough to experience another world, so you're suddenly shifted to another dimension, a parallel dimension, in which you're suddenly in almost the same situation, but you're no longer gonna die. And also, that's something that few people will actually remain in mind with, that you are almost gonna die and you were switched to a different reality. This can actually happen to people who are very aware, because if you're not aware and or introspective enough, you will most likely no longer have the knowledge of this, because parallel shifting, parallel reality shifting is something that happens to all people, to all entities. It's not something that happens to only the most conscious people. And when it happens, it's actually a sign that you have increased or decreased your vibration. Now, this usually happens to us, the conscious ones, and well, everyone. It usually happens to, moving upwards, but it also actually, it depends on what you want to experience, on what you ask the universe to experience. Because if you're constantly asking the universe to experience misery, most likely you will be shifted with one of the facets that's doing poorly at that, and it probably will be doing better in your place. So you are going to be put in, in that facet's location, in that facet's place. So you will experience misery. Now, hopefully, hopefully I gave enough details on this. I will end the video for now. I'm looking forward to bringing in more and more videos about this, and speaking more and more about the wisdom that I have acquired and I'm still acquiring. Don't forget that life is awesome and is always worth existing, irrespective of the challenges that it may throw at you, because the reason why those challenges actually come to you and not to other people is because those people might actually suck. And never forget, consciousness is dependent upon experiencing. So those challenges come to you because consciousness knows that you will experience something that will actually take you beyond that challenge, be it alone or through your astral guides, spiritual guides, animal guides, angels, demons, and all entities that conspire to help you alongside the universe itself. So the idea of life is that it's not happening to you, it's happening for you, and in the end it's happening for experience to go to mother consciousness. That's actually the price that you're paying, and it's actually one of the most simple and easy prices, because whatever you do is an experience. Even if you don't do anything at all, it's still an experience. So don't take this necessarily as a price or as something that's happening to you. Consciousness just requires you to experience that certain thing, because that is why you actually came in here, to learn and experience. And well, through that you will actually experience, and consciousness will be grateful, and it actually puts the whole universe at your feet so that you can actually experience. So through this, all I can say is that life is awesome, and also so are you. Don't forget, live life, expand yourself, don't let yourself down just because other people will pull you down. They are just part of the challenges that life has. So life is awesome, so you are. Ferenjianboardf signing out.